At 72, I believed I had tasted every flavor life had to offer: sweetness, bitterness, and salt alike. My name is Victor Harlow, and I have spent 50 years standing behind the flames of some of Ravenwood's most renowned kitchens. With just one breath, I could tell if a steak had reached perfect doneness. With a single taste, I could pinpoint the exact origin of a spice. I once thought that this gift extended beyond food, that I could read people just as easily. I trusted my ability to see the lie behind a smile, or the ambition hidden in someone's eyes. But I came to realize I had failed in the one place that mattered most, within my own family, with the only son in whom I had placed all my hopes. The kitchen of my home on Ashford Lane had been my greatest pride, a vault of 50 years of memories, the knives I collected from around the world, the copper pots I polished every Sunday until they gleamed, and the lingering warmth of the wife I lost. Yet I never imagined that from that very place, the tragedy of betrayal would begin. If you were in my shoes, betrayed by your own flesh and blood, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to follow the next dramatic chapters of this story. Though I had been retired for 6 years, I still cooked. Not for the crowds I once served, but for myself, for the occasional old friend who came by, or for former colleagues who sometimes stopped in to talk about food. But in this house, everything had changed. Since Marianne passed, there was no one left to praise a new soup or frown when I added too much salt. The house that once overflowed with laughter now felt hollow, like a discarded shell. Only the ticking of the clock echoed in the living room, the dim yellow light casting shadows over the long dining table, cold and bare. Each evening, I felt like a stranger lost inside what was once a home. Pancreatic cancer had taken Marianne in only a few months. Swift, merciless, like a death sentence ringing its final toll in a house that had once been full of warmth. 44 years together dissolved into a suffocating silence nothing could fill. She had been my chief taster, my harshest critic, but also my most loyal audience. Her trust and faith from the days when I was just an unknown cook in a small café had carried me all the way to Silver Vine, where I earned Ravenwood's very first Michelin star. After the funeral, Adrian Harlow came only twice, once to bury his mother, the second a month later to check if I was still alive. He was 44 then, but looked closer to 58, premature gray streaking his hair, a permanent scowl etched into his forehead, eyes cold and calculating, stripped of all familial warmth. When he stepped into the kitchen, his gaze swept over it with open disdain. "Why do you keep this massive kitchen?" Adrian sneered, his voice as cold as steel. "Who needs it now? Mom is gone, you're no longer some famous chef. This house is worth a fortune, what's the point of clinging to it?" Victor Harlow tightened my grip on my favorite Japanese knife, the blade glinting beneath the neon light as if ready to speak for me. But I held myself back, answering each word with deliberate weight. "This isn't just a kitchen, it's my blood, my sweat, my whole life, and it's your mother's home too." He gave a dry laugh, the smile of a lawyer, spotting a profitable case. "Sentimentality is a luxury, father. These days emotions are worthless." I heard the meaning behind the words. Since Marianne's death, all I had left was my pension and a modest savings. The house we had bought 40 years ago was now worth 5 times its price. And Adrian, my only son, had begun to see it not as a home, but as an inheritance to be claimed. It had never been easy between us. When he was young, I often came home late, reeking of kitchens, sweat, grease, smoke embedded in my skin. Marianne used to say he resented my passion for cooking. Maybe she was right. I still remember one weekend when he was 16. I brought him to the restaurant, tried to teach him the basics. He curled his lip, kept his distance from the hot pan, wrinkled his nose at the spices. "This job is filthy, Dad," he said bluntly, eyes filled with disdain. "You're just a servant, bowing all your life before other people's tables. I want more than that." From that day on, he never stepped into the kitchen with me again. He chose his own path. University, law school, marriage to Clarissa Harlow, a beautiful woman from a wealthy background, cold as a wax figure in a gallery. Together, They opened a law firm specializing in property. Encounters between us grew fewer, stiffer, emptier. Even the family dinners Marianne tried so hard to preserve turned grim. No matter how elaborate the dishes I prepared, Adrian would only pick at a salad. Clarissa would nibble politely, then drop words as sharp as a knife. "This olive oil has too much saturated fat. At your age, eating like this will only invite illness." The clatter of cutlery striking plates rang louder than the silence. Meals meant to unite us had become trials, with me in the dock and my son and daughter-in-law seated as cold, unflinching judges. After Marianne's death, the relationship between Adrian and me grew colder still. Our phone calls dwindled into formalities. Once a month, dry holiday greetings, a few perfunctory questions about my health. I knew he was ashamed of me, an uneducated father who had only the kitchen, with scarred hands from knives and burns. He never once invited me to his client gatherings, nor asked me to cook for family events. The culinary mastery I took pride in had become, in his eyes, a symbol of social inferiority. Then one morning in early May, the first pain struck. At first, I thought it was indigestion, perhaps from a new sauce I had tried the night before. But then came the invisible blades, slicing into my chest, radiating into my left shoulder, numbing my fingers as though my body no longer obeyed me. Each breath grew heavier, every inhale like an invisible fist squeezing my chest. I remained lucid just long enough to dial 911 before collapsing against the cold steel of the refrigerator. The hospital greeted me with a blinding nightmare. Fluorescent lights glared down, bouncing off the sterile steel. The acrid smell of disinfectant drilled into my skull, overpowering the taste of rusty blood at the back of my throat. The diagnosis fell like a slow, merciless verdict: severe myocardial infarction, emergency bypass surgery. In my haze, I remembered a nurse dialing Adrian. He answered, his voice hoarse, tense yet strangely distant. "Can you hold on, Dad?" I forced a reply, each word searing in my chest. "Feels like a convoy of trucks just ran me over, but I'm still here." The surgery lasted 6 hours. When I woke in the recovery room, Adrian was sitting at my bedside, still in his crisp suit, phone in hand, his face stiff like a mask, hard to tell where genuine worry ended and calculated control began. "How are you feeling?" he asked, finally tucking the phone into his pocket. "Like I've been run over by a truck," I managed. In the days that followed, he visited every morning. Always immaculate, he'd sit for an hour, talking about work, about the new house he and Clarissa were planning to buy, about politics and the market. But not once did he ask, "What do you need?" or "What do you want?" Clarissa came only once. She placed a bouquet of white lilies on the table without removing the plastic wrap. The crinkling sound was dry, hollow, more like a funeral rite than a gesture of care. On the 5th day, Adrian said, "The doctor says you'll need care after discharge. Don't worry, we'll handle it." I frowned. "I can take care of myself." He cut me off, his tone firm. "Don't be foolish. You just had major surgery. You need someone to look after you." For a fleeting moment, I heard something almost like genuine concern in his voice. A sudden warmth flickered inside me. Perhaps illness had reminded him of his father's fragility. Perhaps there was still hope of mending what was broken. The day before I was discharged, Adrian brought a stack of papers. "Just a few signatures, Dad," he said lightly, almost casually. "In case anything happens, I'll make decisions for you. Quick and simple. Nothing for you to worry about." The harsh white lights burned my eyes. My glasses were at home. The tiny print blurred. The pen trembled in my hand. A flash of suspicion crossed my mind, then faded. I told myself, he's my son. He would never harm me. And I signed. He folded the papers neatly, slipped them into his briefcase. The corner of his mouth curled into a rare smile, but I couldn't tell if it was for me or for the documents now bearing my name. "Tomorrow I'll take you home. Be ready by 10. I lay back, letting the final warmth seep from my chest. This time, it wasn't from pain, but from the fragile hope that perhaps it wasn't too late to be father and son again. That night, I barely slept. In my mind, I kept painting a warm picture. The little kitchen on Ashford Lane glowing again. The scent of pancakes drizzled with blueberry syrup filling the air, the sizzle of the pan drowning out the silence. I imagined Adrian sitting across from me, smiling as he spooned up chicken noodle soup. The two of us actually talking, truly talking, for perhaps the first time in decades. The clearer that image became, the tighter the ache in my chest. Yet I clung to it like a thirsty man clutching his last drop of water. The next morning, the nurse helped me dress, packing up my medications and the few belongings I had. I sat on the edge of the bed, fingering the pill bag like a child holding a ticket home, torn between hope and fear. 9 o'clock in the morning, then 9:20, then 11 o'clock. The clock on the wall ticked like a hammer, striking my temples, stretching each minute into a silent verdict. I stared at my phone. No calls. By noon, I asked the nurse to try calling. Still nothing. "Maybe he's stuck in traffic," she offered, but doubt laced her voice. I kept calling. On the 8th attempt, the screen still flashed unavailable. The name Adrian blurred before my eyes, whether from the harsh fluorescent lights overhead or from my own tears. I couldn't tell. 2 o'clock. I knew Adrian wasn't coming. The hospital couldn't keep me any longer. Another patient needed the bed. The hallway stretched endlessly, dim lights flickering on the cold tile floor, reflecting the few scattered footsteps like ghostly shadows. The emptiness was so deep that even the intercom calling for doctors sounded as if it came from another world. Nurse Gloria, who had cared for me these past days, looked at me with worry. "Mr. Harlow, at least let us call social services. You've just had heart surgery. You need someone to take you home." Her voice carried both reproach and concern, her eyes like a small candle in the cold white light. I straightened my back, the dull ache still burning behind my sternum. "I can still get a taxi. I can still walk on my own." I repeated it like a mantra, clinging to the last shred of pride, the same pride Marianne once said was both my strength and my burden. Gloria sighed but didn't argue. In silence, she opened the ride-hailing app, staying by my side until the driver's message popped up. "Arrived." Before I left the bed, she gave one final warning. "Don't forget to take your medication on time, and if you have trouble breathing, call emergency services immediately." I nodded, forcing a grateful smile, and rose slowly to my feet. I walked down the hallway, clutching my bag of medicine and discharge papers. Each step felt like lead, not just from a body freshly cut open, but from the weight of the truth. I had been abandoned. The hospital doors opened, and the cold wind struck my face. That moment felt like a seal pressed onto my life. It wasn't just the moment I left the hospital, but the moment I stepped out of the last illusion of father and son. 72 years old, fresh off a heart surgery, and yet no one cared enough to pick me up from the hospital. A taxi carried me through the center of town, past the rental car offices. I didn't want to keep depending on taxis or buses. I needed to reclaim a sliver of control, even if it was only a steering wheel, to remind myself that at least part of my life was still mine to decide. The house was in the suburbs. Constant taxis would drain my savings. Inside the rental office, the young clerk with gelled hair looked me up and down, his eyes stopping at my slow gait, and the left hand pressed lightly against my chest. "Are you sure? You can drive yourself? You don't look well." "I've been driving longer than you've been alive," I said dryly. "Give me a small sedan. 1 week." He shrugged and started the paperwork. I chose the cheapest plan, silently recalculating my budget, subtracting the rental cost from my pension. My hand trembled slightly as I signed. He handed me the keys, pointing toward a silver car in the lot. "Want me to carry your bag?" His glance flicked toward the hospital tote. "No need." I swallowed the lump in my throat, hiding the humiliation of an old man fresh from heart surgery. Each step toward the car, the incision reminded me with a dull stab. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door. In the cool cabin air, I allowed myself the first deep breath of the day. My fingers still trembled. What had happened to Adrian? Why didn't he come? An accident? A sudden meeting? I called just the long beep into voicemail. I dialed the house, Clarissa answered. Harlow residence. Her voice was like cold glass, without a crack. Clarissa, it's Victor. I can't reach Adrian. He promised to pick me up from the hospital today. A silence, long and cold. Adrian's in a meeting. He can't take calls. I was just discharged. I'll let him know when he's back. Have you called a taxi? I could almost see her checking her watch, counting the seconds of this inconvenient call. Yes, I handled it myself. Thank you for the concern. I hung up before she could reply, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the last shred of control I had. Pulling out of the lot, I merged into traffic. Trees lining the highway slid past like indifferent shadows. Every sudden break sent a twinge through my chest, as though someone were squeezing my ribcage from the inside. I kept excusing my son. Maybe the meeting was urgent. Maybe he came late and forgot to call. Maybe his phone died. One by one, these defenses crumbled like dry leaves along the roadside. Nausea rose as I turned onto the highway toward Ashford Lane. I pulled over. Ahead, the sign for Mercer's Market, the grocery store where I'd often bought fresh produce and rare spices for my experiments, appeared like a refuge. The bell jingled as I entered. The smell of baked bread, coffee and spices rolled over me, warm as a hearth in winter. Behind the counter stood Daniel Mercer. He looked up, his smile breaking wide. "Victor, long time no see. We were starting to worry." "Hello, Daniel." I tried to smile. "I've been indisposed for a week." His face darkened as he saw me clearly. "You don't look well." What happened? I hadn't planned to tell him, but the words escaped. Heart attack, surgery, discharged today. Daniel came around the counter, taking my elbow. "Good Lord, and you're driving yourself? Where's Adrian? He's not taking care of you?" "I can manage." "Nonsense." He pulled out a chair by the window. "Sit down. I'll make some tea and then we'll figure it out." I had no strength to protest. Steam rose from the pot, the scent of chamomile slipping into my lungs, easing the tremor like a mother's hand on my shoulder. "You shouldn't be driving in this condition," Daniel said, sitting opposite. "I can close early and take you home. Or call Adrian." "Don't call him. I'll rest a bit and drive myself. It's only 20 minutes to Ashford Lane." He eyed me, unconvinced, but nodded. Then he spoke of everyday things. His daughter Amelia had just been accepted to culinary school. A shipment of French cheese had arrived. An organic farm would deliver greens twice a week. Small stories carrying a steady pulse of life, setting my heart back into rhythm. At the next table, an elderly couple I recognized rose. The husband laid a hand on my shoulder. "Wonderful to see Chef Harlow again. My wife Marge and I still remember our 60th anniversary dinner at Silver Vine. Best memory of our lives." I smiled. Strange how food could hold memories longer than photographs. "Thank you." Daniel watched me, smiling knowingly. "See? You're not just cooking, you're creating memories." By the time I finished the tea, the dizziness had eased, strength returning. "Let me pack some things for you," Daniel said. "Something light and nourishing. You need to recover." I nodded. He packed fresh bread, soup made by Helen his wife, plus fruit and yogurt. I looked around. Wooden shelves stacked with care, spice jars labeled in handwriting, loaves cracking softly as they cooled. All of it rekindled my urge to stand at a stove, to slice, stir, season, to live. "Here." Daniel handed me the bag. "No charge. Don't argue. Think of it as from an old friend." I wanted to refuse, but his eyes were kind and firm. I could only thank him and promise to come back next week. "Call me if you need anything. Any time, Victor. No one should go through this alone." I hugged the bag like a reminder. Adrian might not have come, but life still had room for kindness. Stepping outside, the afternoon sun poured warmer than when I entered, as though that doorway divided two worlds. I tightened my grip on the wheel as I returned to the car. The pain subsided, leaving behind a thin, sinewy resolve. I wasn't finished. I still had friends, and I would reclaim my life. The drive back home felt slower than any journey I had ever made. I kept to a cautious speed, stopped at every red light, yielded to each pedestrian. The engine hummed steadily. The wipers dragged across the dry windshield. Everything seemed unnaturally calm. Outside, traffic surged forward, everyone rushing. But I alone in the narrow cabin had only my labored breathing and the dull ache left from surgery. In my mind, I let myself dream. I imagined unlocking the front door. Adrian would rush in, apologizing for being late, offering regret. We would sit in the familiar kitchen, share dinner with the food Daniel had prepared. I would tell him about the surgery. He would tell me about his important meeting, and maybe for the first time in decades we would truly talk as father and son. I knew it was only an illusion. Yet hope is stubborn. It sprouts even through the hardened asphalt of resentment. The car turned onto Ashford Lane. 40 years on this street, every pothole, every tree root was familiar. This was where I had raised Adrian, where Marianne and I had lived our best years, where I once thought I would spend the rest of my life. I stopped at number 62, the house with the white fence and the rose bushes Marianne planted 20 years ago. But today, some of the roses were uprooted, branches hacked short like an unhealed wound. Lights glowed inside, my heart quickened, hope rising. I shut off the engine, breathed deeply, carefully lifted the grocery bag and the hospital tote. But as I stepped onto the porch, I froze. The doorknob gleamed, unfamiliar, new, cold, strange. I swallowed hard, telling myself, Adrian must have changed it while I was in the hospital. A rare sign of initiative? I pulled out my key, slid it in. The metal pushed back, rejecting me. I tried again, still no use. My key no longer belonged to this house. Pain stabbed through my chest. Stay calm. He must have changed the lock. He'll give me a new key. I pressed the doorbell. The buzzer whined into silence. No answer. I pressed again, longer. Still nothing. I knocked, softly, then harder. Adrian, it's me, your father, Victor. Open the door. From inside came the sound of a television. Footsteps. I knew someone was there. The living room curtain shifted. Clarissa's face appeared behind the glass. Our eyes met, not relief, not welcome, only annoyance, as if I were a salesman intruding uninvited. Clarissa, I waved, forcing back the tremor. The lock. I can't open it. What's going on? She vanished. Footsteps again, then the curtain at the side window slid open. Her pale face, lips pressed tight, and her words cut through the glass, cold as ice. Leave. You're not welcome here. I staggered back, as if slapped. What do you mean? This is my house. I just came back from the hospital. We know, she said, voice sharp as a blade. Adrian is here. But you have no rights anymore. Leave, before I call the police. I stood paralyzed. No rights? I paid this house off 15 years ago. It's mine, Marianne's. Silence. The door cracked open, but only as far as the chain allowed. Through the gap, Adrian's face appeared. Hair groomed, clean-shaven, but his eyes were cold, unfamiliar, looking at me like a stranger. What are you doing here? His tone was flat, the same he used with a difficult client. My throat tightened. I live here. This is my home. Why did you change the locks? What's happening, Adrian? He sighed, speaking as if to a child needing instruction. You signed full power of attorney at the hospital, and the deed transfer. This house now belongs to me. Blood drained from my face. The papers before discharge, the signatures scrawled under the sterile lights. You said those were medical forms. My voice cracked. Consent for treatment. He shrugged. You should have read carefully. Legal documents, properly notarized. No one forced you. Now everything belongs to me. Everything? I nearly roared. This is your mother's house, where she planted every rose out front, where I meant to spend the rest of my days. You're too old to keep this place. Clarissa and I need it. Property values here are rising. We'll sell it for profit. It's just business. Business? I blocked the door, fury pouring into every word. You call family, memories, your parents' marriage business? Stop making this harder, Father. He spat the word like mockery. This isn't personal. It's only business. Clarissa appeared behind him, voice icy. We've thrown out most of your things. A few boxes left in the garage. Come tomorrow and take them. That's it." I shook, imagining it all: photographs with Marianne, her handwritten letters, recipe books dusted with sugar stains, my Japanese knives collected over 50 years discarded like trash. "You have no right!" I roared. "Yes, I do," Adrian shot back. "This is my house now, and I've decided you're moving to a nursing home. That's what's best for your health." The words struck like a verdict. No longer a son, only a lawyer reading a sentence. I forced out the only response left. "If Marianne could see what you've become, she'd never rest in peace. She'd never rest in peace." Adrian's face twisted in rage. "Don't bring up Mother," he snarled. "It was you who chained her life to that kitchen, who killed her dreams with your obsession." I stumbled back, dizzy. The door slammed shut. The chain rattled. I stood there, alone, before a house that was no longer mine. Inside, the TV blared louder, drowning out my voice. Outside, the night wind lashed against my healing scar. This pain needed no heart monitor to diagnose. It carried a name clear and merciless: betrayal. Where was I supposed to go now? What was I supposed to do? No one prepares you for the moment your own son throws you out just days after heart surgery. I sat in the rental car, parked in front of what used to be my house, like a ghost peering into a life that no longer belonged to me. Behind the living room curtain, Clarissa's silhouette flickered, then yanked the fabric shut, erasing me from the frame. In another window, Adrian held a phone to his ear. Perhaps he truly was calling the police. I turned the key. The engine coughed alive. I drove away. Outside, the trees blurred into indifferent black streaks. The turn signal ticked. The phone buzzed once, then died. Wind scraped palm fronds across the windshield with a rasping shh. The world offered no reply. I gripped the steering wheel as if it were the last piece of control I still had, though every vibration sent a sharp ache through the fresh incision in my chest. A few blocks later, a weary neon sign appeared. Ironwood Inn. 2 stories, an empty parking lot, a rusted stairwell creaking like old bones. I had no other choice. Stepping out, one hand pressed against my chest as if to hold my heart in place, I climbed to the reception desk. A middle-aged woman with dyed red hair emerged. Her eyes flicked briefly at the scar peeking beneath my collar, then back to her screen. Her nails clicked against the keyboard. ID, card. Her voice was as flat as glass. "I need a room. A few days. Room 304, 2nd floor, $95. Check out at 1. A flimsy keycard slid across the counter. Coffee and bagels in the lobby, 7 to 9. The stairs. Which side?" My voice came short, clipped. "End of the hall." The iron railing bit cold into my palm. Each step felt like a shallow cut. Halfway up, pain spread to my jaw. Cold sweat beaded at my temples. Count. 5 beats. Start again. I paused, then forced myself upward. Room 304 greeted me with the smell of cheap air freshener laced with mold. The carpet felt like damp dog fur. The air conditioner wheezed. The old television fuzzed with static. On the ceiling, water stains bloomed into a map of some place I'd never been. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, coat still on, nerves strung as taut as wire. One day. In just one day I had lost my house, most of my belongings, and worst of all, the last fragile illusion I had left about Adrian. My chest clenched. Nausea surged. The doctors had warned, avoid stress. But how does one avoid betrayal? I dug into the hospital bag, twisted open a bottle, and swallowed a pill dry. It lodged in my throat. Tap water washed it down, metallic as a key that no longer opened my door. Shoes off, I lay back, eyes fixed on the yellowed stains above. I turned on the TV just to hear another breathing presence. A canned laughter talk show, news of a hurricane elsewhere, basketball scores, gas prices rising. Of all things tonight, only gas prices were updated. I was erased. Pain crawled from my chest to my shoulder, up my neck. 6 out of 10, 7. My breaths came short, jagged. Call 911 and say what? My son stole my house? I shut my eyes and counted. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4. Again. Cold sweat slicked my palms, hands trembling. Not now. Don't give in now. I can't let him win this easily. I tried to distract myself. The smell of fresh bread, the texture of a perfect sauce, Marianne's smile when she tasted something new. But even those memories were poisoned photos, handwritten letters, recipe books dusted with sugar stains. Clarissa had said they were thrown out. The thought pierced deeper than any scalpel, a second breaking of the heart. No monitor could measure the rhythm of a father's collapse. I sat up and saw the bag Daniel had packed for me, the one thread of warmth in this cold room. I opened the container of soup, no microwave, but the faint sweetness of carrots, the sharp note of dill, the richness of chicken bones, all of it steadied my trembling hand. First spoonful, survive. Second, endure. Third, rise. How do you fight back? Adrian was right. I had no money, no knowledge of the law. He was a lawyer, versed in loopholes. And me, a broken old man with a patched-up heart. But no betrayal is not something anyone deserves. The medicine slowly took hold. The pain dulled, not gone, just lowered to a background hum. I pulled the blanket to my chin, though the room was warm. Inside, I was still cold. On the nightstand lay a crumpled phone book and a greasy pizza menu, the entire life of the dispossessed, reduced to 2 scraps of paper. I smoothed Daniel's grocery bag, the way one might smooth a child's hair. In the hall, someone dragged a suitcase. The iron stairs groaned again. The clock flashed 11:47 p.m. I closed my eyes. Memories flickered. Adrian at 3, wobbling with a whisk. At 16, sneering. You're just a servant, Dad. At 37, immaculate in his suit, sliding those papers across under the harsh hospital lights. Just a few signatures, Dad. Where had I gone wrong? The question hung in the air, heavy as chlorine. No, I whispered. Enough. Tomorrow I would call Daniel, before the pain returned. I counted my breaths. 5, 5, 5. The room tilted like the deck of a ship. Finally, exhaustion of body and soul dropped the curtain. I drifted into a fitful sleep, clutching the keycard to room 304 as if it were a temporary ticket, until I could find my way back to a real home. I dreamed of the house not as it had been when I left, but hollow, an empty shell. Plaster dust fell thick as snow, the smell of damp wood rising. Somewhere, beams creaked with hollow snaps. I ran from room to room, searching for a shadow, a voice finding only emptiness, cracked walls, collapsing ceilings. I rushed to the doors, but each one opened onto a blinding white void. I jolted awake, gasping. Harsh white light, the color of hospitals, bled through the thin curtains. The TV blared a morning show, the host forcing a laugh at some flat joke. Breaking news. The weather's fine, and no one's missing me. The thought cut like a blade. I blinked. Ironwood Inn, room 304. Adrian had stolen the house. I had lost everything in a single day. My chest throbbed, pulse hammering in my temples. I took stock. Dizziness down to 3 out of 10, nausea receding. Inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 6. Repeat. I was still breathing, still moving, still alive. And if I was alive, I could fight. Not in court, not by his rules, by mine. I pulled back the curtain. Outside was a brittle gold morning, sky clear of clouds. The world kept turning as if Victor Harlow had never existed. If the world gives me another day, I told the rising sun, I'll take it. And we'll see who endures longer, a lawyer who bends the law, or an old chef with a stitched-up heart that refuses to surrender. The next 3 days played out like a slow reel of film. Day 1. Cheap air freshener stifled everything, curtains sticky with dust, paper cups bent at the rim. Nurse Gloria called. How's the pain today? 6, 7, when I remember the house. Taking your meds? Yes, I'm only missing a home. I didn't say the words. My son stole my house. Language itself couldn't bear that weight. Day 2. Pipes groaned behind the wall. A damp stain bloomed wider across the ceiling. A banking SMS buzzed faintly. Debit $86.40, Ironwood Inn. My balance dropped another rung. 8 nights of solitude left, I calculated. I wondered if Adrian had already touched the accounts. Day 3. The sheets bore the imprint of one lonely body. My thumb flipped channels without thought. The room keycard hung on its hook like a lost luggage tag. I couldn't keep living like this. On the 4th morning, I called Daniel Mercer at Redwood Market, the one man who didn't see me as a burden. He came at once. The knock on the motel door was firm, steady. He carried a brown paper bag, steam still warm above a soup container, and the blister packs of pills I'd forgotten. I told him everything. He listened, only shaking his head now and then, his fingers tapping 3 times against his knee, then pausing, a habit of his when weighing options. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Good lawyers are expensive. Adrian's a property attorney. He knows every loophole." Daniel paused. "I've got an idea. Not about lawyers, about housing. You can't keep burning money here. Above Redwood Market there's a loft sitting empty for 6 months. 1 bedroom, a living room, a small kitchen. Clean, warm, close to the store. I can keep an eye on you." I can't accept that." Pride snagged in my throat. "Who said charity?" Daniel smiled, pulled a key from his pocket, and set it on a blank sheet of paper. "Here's the deal. You move in. In return, you help me set up the cafe I've been planning. Menu, kitchen layout, workflow, a few hours a week. Fair trade." I stared at the key, didn't touch it. Inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 6. After 2 more breaths, I nodded. We moved my things. The wooden stairs groaned, but the scent of flour and coffee rising from below pulled me out of the pit. The loft was bright, high-ceilinged, with sturdy if old furnishings. The little kitchen, its stainless steel counter dulled, its cutting board scarred, clicked something alive inside me. "Got the basics? Salt, oil?" I asked. "Downstairs, shelves full," Daniel chuckled. "Take what you need, just don't overdo it, you're still recovering." That evening, for the first time in so long, I stood at a stove, chopping onions, sautéing garlic, deglazing with wine, pulling tomatoes down into sauce, the hiss of simmer, the scent of oregano rising, the warmth clinging to my skin. Every stir of the spoon was an act of defiance. I was stitching back a torn tendon. I was still Victor Harlow. My essence didn't leave with that house. Daniel came up, and I asked him to stay. A small table by the window, plates of deep red pasta, a cheap bottle of wine. "If you call this simple," Daniel laughed after tasting, "then the rest of my life must be a fraud." "Simple is the hardest thing," I said, and my chest warmed with more than wine. "How's your heart?" he asked, pouring another glass. "Physically better," I admitted. "Mentally, I don't think it will ever heal in the old sense." "Helen, my wife, always says," Daniel replied, setting his glass down, "it isn't time that heals, it's learning not to scratch the scar." The words dropped like an anchor. We spoke a little more, then Daniel left. That night, I didn't sleep. The ceiling was blank white. Adrian's name slid silently through my mind like a thin blade. For the first time since being shut out of my own house, I wasn't only hurt, I was angry. A cold anger, edged, patient. The next morning, my thoughts were sharp as glass. Not a full plan, just a direction. I wouldn't meet him in court. He lived in loopholes. I lived in rhythm. People are like sauces. One wrong beat of heat, and they split. I knew his rhythms, ambition, pride, image. And I had cuisine, the universal language that opens doors iron keys can't. Tomorrow, I'd start with a pot of tomato sauce and a phone call. Every serious battle, after all, begins in the kitchen. I began like a chef bent on revenge, shopping for spices. What I needed wasn't pepper or salt or wine. It was information about Adrian Harlow, his work, his life, his habits, his weaknesses. If you want to bring a difficult sauce to a boil, first you must understand its heat cycle. After breakfast, I went down to Redwood Market. Daniel Mercer was lining up apples. When he saw me, he smiled. "How's sleeping up in the loft?" he asked. Much better than the Ironwood Inn. I lowered my voice. Daniel, I need your help. Do you know anyone who's worked with Adrian's law firm? He thought for a beat, his fingers tapping his knee 3 times, then stopping. Helen, my wife, does bookkeeping for a few small businesses. She might have heard things, but if the source leaks, she loses clients. You sure? I'll protect the source. I looked him in the eye. I need everything. Clients, reputation, where he's vulnerable. Daniel nodded. I'll ask Helen, and you call a few people in the restaurant world. Ravenwood is small. Everyone knows everyone. Maybe someone's crossed paths with Adrian or Clarissa. I carried my black notebook with colored tabs. Clients, bitter, rumors, sour, weaknesses, spicy. Every time Adrian's name came up, the scar throbbed. I counted 426 to steady myself. A montage of calls began ringing unanswered. A spoon clinking a cup, a delivery truck beeping in the market. I opened casually. How are you? I'm thinking about consulting on a seasonal menu. Then slipped in the blade. By the way, my son, Adrian Harlow, is a lawyer. Do you know him? Most people shook their heads. Then Sylvia Grant, owner of Willow and Thyme, whose opening I'd once helped, fell silent for 3 beats when I said the name. Is he your son? Sylvia whispered. My God, Victor, I didn't know. Just asking, I said, my hand trembling so the ink smudged. Is he reliable? Ruthless, Sylvia swallowed. When I divorced, Adrian represented my ex. He slipped in a hidden late fee clause in Appendix C. She let out a dry laugh. I lost a whole branch because of one line, one clause. I scribbled, Appendix C, habit of hiding the knife. Sylvia arranged to meet me the next day. I've got a few private things you'll want to hear. That afternoon, Daniel came back with a white envelope smeared with fruit oil. Helen's note. The scrap read succinctly, Harlow and Partners, small but profitable. Reputation, tough, efficient. Specialty, divorces, estates, property disputes. Nickname, real estate vultures. Habits, arrives 15 minutes early, makes clients sign in blue ink, spins his ring 3 times before saying, this is my final offer. Rumor, occasionally invests on the side, buys distressed property cheaply, flips for profit. Legal? Yes. Ethical? Hard to say. I closed my eyes. Adrian had turned loopholes into a grave-digging business, and now he was using it on his own father. The ache in my chest crept toward my jaw. 426. The next morning, Willow and Thyme smelled of buttery pastries and lavender. Sylvia hugged me, then steered me to a secluded table. You look too thin, Victor. What's wrong? I hadn't meant to tell, but the words poured out like a simmering sauce. Sylvia listened, then squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm against a raw place. I know he's ruthless, but to do this to his own father. She paused. After my divorce, I hired a private detective. Nothing illegal, but there are things you should know. She leaned in and lowered her voice. Adrian and Clarissa's marriage is fractured. Clarissa is used to luxury. Adrian hasn't always been able to keep up. There've been rumors of separation. And he's been meeting a woman frequently, off the clock, not officially. Lydia Crane, Deputy General Counsel at Atlas Assurance Group, a big insurer in town. I looked up. Atlas Assurance Group? Yes. The PI even had photos. 2236, them leaving a riverside bar twice in 1 week. Word is Atlas is seeking a state-level legal representative, a very big contract. Adrian is a heavyweight candidate. One signature could pay his 3 years at the country club, I thought. Image is Adrian's lifeblood. If that image fractures, he bleeds. I need timing, I said. When will they decide? Not sure, Sylvia shook her head. But I heard Atlas reps will be in town next week for a closing dinner. Thank you. My pulse quickened, but my head stayed colder. 426. By midday, Daniel texted. Helen confirmed more. Clarissa has consulted counsel from one of Adrian's direct rivals. Accounts are being separated. Family photos still hang on the wall, cracked paint around the frame. I wrote, marriage cracked image to be preserved. Late afternoon, Sylvia called back breathless. It's scheduled. Wednesday, 7:20 p.m., Celestine Hall, private room. A party of 3. 2 from Atlas's Chicago office and the local branch director. Celestine Hall, amber light on coarse linen, knives singing on chopping blocks, the open kitchen whispering like an orchestra. The head chef there is Edward Lane, an old pupil of mine, talented but still hungry for recognition. I added to the weaknesses tab. Private room, open kitchen, warm amber light. I called Edward. "Chef Harlow?" His voice was flustered, then delighted. "God, I've missed you. How's your health?" "Better than it was," I answered plainly. "I need to be at Celestine Hall Tuesday night. Personal matter. I can't explain everything now, but it's important." A silence on the line. I could hear the rustle of his chef's cloth, Edward's habit of smoothing his apron's edge 3 times before service. "This isn't strictly ethical," Edward said in a low voice. "If someone audits the roster tonight, I'm in trouble." "I know, and I'm grateful." I swallowed. "He stole everything from me, Edward. I just need a door." Another pause. Then, 5 p.m. staff entrance. "I'll introduce you as a seasonal menu consultant. And try not to make me lie too many times." "You'll have my debt," I breathed. One link clicked into place. On Sunday, Sylvia texted another detail. The Atlas woman's full name, Lydia Crane, and that she would also attend the dinner. I underlined, "Lydia, the sauce is vain." Adrian had an inside person, an advantage that could also be a liability. If the relationship crossed professional lines and someone above found out. Monday morning, Daniel brought more from Helen. At the bank, we saw Clarissa open a separate account 3 months ago. Recent odd transactions, recurring payments at Celestine Day Spa, a rendezvous spot for wealthy wives. She doesn't know about Lydia. The pieces snapped together. A crumbling marriage, an off-hours liaison, a golden contract, and a respectable lawyer living on image. I flipped through my notebook. Client Atlas Assurance Group, rumor Lydia, separation, weakness pride, ethical facade. Am I playing dirty or balancing the scales? I asked myself, my finger sliding over the old knife mark on the board. Then I answered, if justice in court costs too much, I'll cook it on low heat. I needed 2 more things. 1. Confirmation of time divided by place, divided by attendees, so I could be in the right place at the right moment. 2. The room's heat rhythm, who calls the shots. The 2 Chicago reps or the local director? I texted Edward, table, under which name? He replied, Harlow 4 covers. I smiled without pleasure. Adrian had the vanity to put my name on the booking. Very appropriate. I closed the notebook and added a final line under plan. Celestine Hall equals the oven. Atlas equals the tender rack. Lydia equals the sauce's vein. Adrian's image igual a caramelized shell. Action. Adjust the heat, let truth rise on its own. That dinner would be the oven. I only had to tend the temperature. The rest, the truth would do the rising. 17:02. I woke with a clear list. For the first time since being thrown out of my home, I felt at the wheel. Adrian has money and the law. I have the truth and resolve. I know this move will be called petty, but he flayed my dignity first. 17:45. Staff entrance, Celestine Hall. The incision twinged like a ticking time bomb. Edward Lane came out himself, tall, lean, early silver in his hair. You understand the risk? He lowered his voice. If there's an audit tonight, your name isn't on the roster. I could lose a star. I'm cooking a dish called justice, I said. I won't overfire it. He led me through the kitchen, knives singing, fire whooshing, cries of service, like commands. In back, steel is white. Out front, amber lights like honey. In between me, Edward handed me a starched white's jacket with the logo. I slipped it on. My shoulders came up on their own. Private room at 18:30, under Harlow 4 guests, he said. Staff think you're consulting on the seasonal menu. I stepped onto the line, whispered a tip here, a seasoning tweak there. I set the knife on the board like a judge sets the gavel. My hearing had begun. 1822. The back patio. Sylvia Grant brought a short-haired blonde in a neat suit, eyes tired. Lydia Crane, Deputy General Counsel at Atlas Assurance Group, Sylvia said. You're Victor Harlow, Adrian's father? Lydia froze. I'll be blunt, I met her gaze. He's lied to you and to his wife, and he threw a heart surgery patient, his father, out onto the street. I told it. The recovery room, the authorizations under white lights, the new lock and the front door slamming. Lydia listened, moved from doubt to shock, then gripped her bag strap. He told me you'd gone abroad for treatment, that you'd given him a durable power of attorney, she whispered. Do you have a notarization for a father's trust? I asked, dry. And that separation, Clarissa doesn't see it that way. Lydia unlocked her phone. 2250 photo of him leaving Mortar Bar with me. Not work hours. Coffee receipt 2309 in the hotel lobby. Not illegal, but Atlas doesn't like ambiguity. I'm not telling you what to do, I said, just inviting the truth to sit at the table tonight. She was silent a few beats, then nodded. I'll be there. Lydia left. Sylvia looked at me. Victor, this will hurt. I know. He left me no choice. 1838. I texted Daniel Mercer. Call Clarissa. Pretend you're the restaurant host. Tell her Mr. Harlow invites you at 2300 to celebrate the deal. Copy, Daniel replied. My voice is very front desk. 1857. The reservation chime pinged softly. My heart matched it. I pressed the incision 426, braced a palm on the cold steel table. The knife stopped trembling. 1932. Edward leaned in. They're here. One gray-haired man, very sharp eyes, one woman in a pearl-pin suit, and Adrian. Lydia, not yet. I'll cook that table myself, I said. You just had surgery. I'm fine. Or I need to believe I am. 1945. Through the kitchen window, Lydia joined the table. Adrian smiled just right, showed nothing, he's always sealed tight. I sent the appetizer tuna tartare with avocado with a wine pairing card. A dot of blue ink in the corner, our mark. In tiny print, Pinot Noir, ask about father. Now, Lydia read it, looked up, gave the slightest nod. Service found its rhythm. I chopped, sautéed, deglazed, pulled the sauce. Brown butter, truffles, wine vapor braided together. Oil popped like a small drumline. The table's mood shifted hue. Adrian taught, Lydia keeping to the line of questioning, the two Atlas reps exchanging notes. The main beef tenderloin with truffle jus went out. I chose to step into the hall. 2020. I carried a tray of chocolate choux, my signature, the anchor dessert, and pushed into the private room. The imaginary camera panned. Tray the gray-haired man's eyes, Adrian's face warped in the wine glass, Lydia's hand tightening on the stem back to the tray. Adrian was saying, I assure you, my father is entirely well and supports all my decisions. This is merely a misunderstanding. An interesting narrative, I said, setting the tray down. He froze. Dad? What are you doing here? Working, son, I smiled. You taking my house doesn't mean I stopped being a chef. Silence snapped tight. The gray-haired man aligned his knife, voice mild but cutting. Did you just say your son took your house? Your name is, I began. Arthur Whitman, CEO of Atlas Assurance Group. I'm Victor Harlow, I said clearly. 2 weeks ago I had heart surgery. On the 10th, while I was still on IVs, my son put a durable power of attorney and a deed transfer in front of me. I didn't have my glasses. I signed where he pointed. When I got home, new locks. I was turned off my own porch. Adrian shot up. That's not true. You were fully lucid when you signed, and the documents were notarized. Did you notarize a father's trust? I asked. Or just the paper? The pearl-pinned woman looked to Lydia. Miss Crane, does this fall on our ethics risk checklist? Lydia set down her pen. I verified. Victor was hospitalized from April 5th to 11th. The deed bears the date of the 10th. Call logs and billing confirm Mr. Adrian was at the hospital that day. Adrian's face went dark. Slander. I'll sue your father right after taking his house? Whitman drummed a steady decision-maker's rhythm on the knife handle. That isn't a value Atlas seeks in a partner. Mr. Whitman, Adrian softened into professional smile. This is a family matter. Please don't let it affect. A family matter? I shook my head. You call throwing your post-op father out of his home a family matter? Whitman stood. The chair scraped a long line, like striking a name off a contract. I think we're done here. Miss Crane? Lydia rose too. Wait. Adrian grabbed for her hand. Lydia, let's speak privately. She pulled free. There's nothing left to say, professionally or personally. They left. Honeyed light died. Cold steel rushed in. Adrian spun on me, face twisted with rage. You staged all of this. You torpedoed the deal I've chased for months. And you torpedoed a life, I said evenly. Did you think you'd get away with it? He lunged closer. You won't have a place in New Albany when I'm done. I tilted my head toward the stunned servers along the wall. Please take down that statement in your ear logs. He stalled, inhaled hard, and ground out. This isn't over. I know, I said, laying the service towel over my wrist like an oath. It's only just begun. The door slammed, glasses rattled. I gripped the edge of the stainless table. The smell of metal brought me back to 426. My chest seized, then eased. I was still standing. 2052. Dessert was out. The rest let the truth cool it. I sank into the stainless steel chair, breath tangled like knotted thread. Cold sweat slid down the back of my neck. My heart pounded in time with the kitchen bell ting, ting, like a warning chime. My body was more exhausted than I'd imagined, but it was worth it. The moment Adrian realized he had lost the contract with Atlas Assurance Group for the first time since I was discharged from the hospital, I felt satisfaction rise within me, burning hot like a gulp of strong liquor. A minute later, Edward Lane poked his head in, worry still clouding his eyes. What just happened out there? The guests in the private room left before dessert was even touched. The woman with them stormed off as if chased. I carried into the kitchen what I shouldn't have. Blood and betrayal, I rasped. I'm sorry for the disturbance in your Celestine hall tonight, but I had no other choice. Edward shook his head. Don't apologize. Whatever it was, I'm still on your side. Go take a break in the office. In the office, the light was harsh white. I drank water, swallowed the pills. My hand trembled slightly as the medicine began to take hold. The phone buzzed text from Daniel Mercer. Clarissa confirmed she'll arrive at 2300, surprised and delighted to be invited. I pressed a thin smile. The second half of the strike was moving on schedule, 2240. My heartbeat had slowed. I returned to the line, picked up a few kitchen tickets, let my body slide into the familiar rhythm. Chop stir-fry, whisk the sauce. Outside, golden honey light. Inside, searing white steel, two parallel worlds about to collide. 2258. Edward leaned close. There's a distinguished lady here asking for Mr. Harlow. Take Clarissa Harlow into the same private room as before, I instructed, and tell her that her husband will be right there. The lie fit perfectly. 2308. Edward hesitated again. The woman who left with the earlier guests has returned. She asked for the restroom. Lydia Crane, I nodded. Guide her through the corridor that passes by the private room. The sharp sound of heels echoed against the wooden floor, toke, 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 resonating in the hushed hallway like a hammer about to strike. Through the glass pane, I saw Lydia stop short when she spotted Clarissa sitting there, her hand lightly on a wineglass. Instead of turning away, she walked straight into the room and pulled out a chair across from her. Mrs. Harlow? Lydia began, her smile thin as a blade. I'm Lydia Crane, Atlas Assurance Group. Your husband and I are colleagues. Clarissa frowned. Adrian invited me for 11. Were you invited as well? Oh no. Lydia's lips curved. Strange. Isn't it Adrian promised me? You were no longer in the picture. Clarissa set her napkin down, voice cold as ice. Is that so? And yet tonight? Adrian promised me Atlas was only waiting for the contract to be signed. Take a look at this. Lydia unlocked her phone. Photo from 2235 of him leaving Mortar Bar with her. coffee receipt 2312 in the hotel lobby, an after-hours scheduling email, each piece of evidence sliced through the veneer of innocence. Not illegal, Lydia said slowly, but Atlas doesn't tolerate ambiguity in business or in life. I couldn't catch every word, but I watched Clarissa's face shift, confusion, shock, fury. Her napkin twisted tight, knuckles white. The wine glass quivered from the forceful set-down, the heavy perfume pressed in, thick as oxygen before an explosion. He betrayed you, Lydia concluded, voice hoarse, just as he betrayed his father. The door clicked shut. Outside, cutlery clinked, guests laughed, glasses chimed. Inside, it was silent as a closed courtroom. 20 minutes later, Clarissa still hadn't moved. Then she switched her phone to speaker. Adrian. Her voice was sharp as shattered glass. Where are you? The reply was chaos, but a few words rang down the corridor. Atlas. Lydia. Don't lie to me. A few diners turned their heads. Bad news spreads faster than wine. Moments later, Edward came back to the kitchen. The lady in the room has paid and left. She looked as if she'd just walked away from an explosion without the sound. I nodded. The kitchen bell chimed once. My heart answered and then eased. What are you really doing, Victor? Edward asked, brow furrowed. Are you sure you want to push it this far? Family? Once that line is crossed, it's hard to return. I stared straight into the flame of the stove, letting the steel-white glare reflect in my eyes. Family ended the day he signed the paper betraying me. This is only the supplementary indictment. Edward stayed silent. I adjusted the service towel on my wrist. This isn't revenge, I murmured, the words dropping heavy as rock salt. This is the only recipe left. 1 part truth, 1 part consequence, and I'm just the one cooking it into a dish. Out there, Celestine Hall glowed warm and golden as if nothing had happened. In here, the white steel glare still cut sharp, 2 parallel worlds colliding and splitting apart. The first strike fell on Atlas. The second on the family had already lit its fuse. 12:20 a.m. Celestine Hall had emptied of guests. I stripped off my chef's coat, shoulders heavy. Edward Lane insisted on calling a taxi. You're exhausted, he murmured, steadying me toward the door. Let me get you into the car. The engine roared through the drizzle. Streetlights fractured into streaks across the windshield, dragging my shadow long like spilled ink. I replayed the entire evening, Adrian Harlow losing his grip on the Atlas Assurance Group contract, Lydia Crane walking away with finality, Clarissa Harlow's face freezing, then cracking. Reputation, connections, the veneer of a model lawyer peeling away in layers. I should have felt triumphant. Instead of victory, there was a hollow space, cold as the bottom of an upturned glass. The war wasn't over, only quiet for the moment. Adrian was not one to yield. He still held the house, the belongings my entire life in his grasp. Above Redwood Market, Daniel Mercer was still waiting. The clock struck 12 with a dry clang. Steam from the tea curled thin, like smoke in an interrogation room. At last you're back, he exhaled. I was starting to worry. I collapsed into the chair, recounting each cut. The cold nod from the Atlas man, the collision of Lydia and Clarissa, Adrian's storm of rage. Daniel listened silently, only shaking his head now and then. You're formidable, Victor, he said at last, more respect than judgment in his tone. Remind me never to cross you. I gave a bitter laugh. It's nothing to be proud of. He pushed me to the edge. And now? Wait. Either he falls or he bites back. Daniel said slowly, You've won a round. A wounded wolf will bite at any cost. The words stuck. What did I truly want? To get the house back, yes. To have justice, absolutely. But to destroy my son's life? For all his betrayal, he was still the boy who once had powdered sugar stuck around his mouth in my kitchen. I don't know, I admitted. I only know I can't let him destroy me. Daniel nodded, poured me a cup of honey tea brewed exactly to my taste. Rest. Tomorrow will be long. 6 months later, Ravenwood turned a new season. My reflection showed in the surface of the new espresso machine. Silver hair, deep-set eyes, back straight. No longer the old man hunched at Ironwood Inn, I was the owner of Victor's Café, small, warm, scented with fresh pastries. The idea had fallen suddenly, like a bolt sliding shut born from that very night. At dawn, Clarissa met me in a 24-hour diner, cold neon, cutlery clinking. She looked straight at me, voice like ice. "I'm not helping you out of pity. I want him to lose everything, and you are the only piece capable of flipping the board." She pushed a file across. "I'm filing for divorce. I need you to testify in court about the power of attorney." I said nothing. Clarissa leaned closer. "In return, when the court voids it, I'll ensure the house is restored to you." I agreed, not because of her promise. I wasn't foolish enough to trust, but because it was the only legal path to bring justice back to my side. The trial. Harsh neon light, the scent of old paper and disinfectant. Camera flashes burst, whispers rippled across the wooden benches. Adrian entered in a dark suit, charcoal tie, his face drawn taut as wire. His lawyer's voice rang smooth. My client acted out of protection for a gravely ill father, suffering memory decline. The supposed fraud was nothing more than misunderstanding. I braced my hand on the stand, looked the judge directly in the eye. "My memory is sharp down to every scar on my hand," I said slowly. "And I remember exactly what my son told me when he placed the pen on that paper." Nurse Gloria presented the medication chart, the anesthesia recovery timeline. The doctor confirmed. On the signing date, I was still in heavy post-surgery state, without glasses, under side effects of painkillers. Records bore clear timestamps. 2 nurses testified to Adrian's exact words. Medical forms, sign quickly to complete the procedure. Each sentence hammered into the wood. Sweat beaded his temple. His hand clenched the pen until the cap snapped. Clarissa took the witness stand, cold as glass. Not a glance at her husband, she faced the judge and handed over bank statements of separated accounts and the string of after-hours messages with Lydia. No moral judgment, only a strike at professional codes. An email excerpt was read aloud. "Once Atlas is done, everything else will simplify." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Adrian's expression flickered empty for a beat. On my side, Daniel and Helen Mercer confirmed the timeline of my eviction, Ironwood Inn bills, prescriptions, and doctors' restrictions against exertion. A straight line of truth stretched from the hospital bed to the locked porch. Adrian's lawyer countered one last time. The durable power of attorney was notarized, the signature clearly valid. "Fine," I said evenly. "And the trust of a father, did you notarize that too?" The gavel struck. 3 blows, sharp as axe strokes. The power of attorney nullified, the property transfer voided, my right of residence restored until handover completed. Consequences attached. Adrian's ethical record referred to the state bar. Outside the corridor, reporters scribbled in haste. Old faces from the culinary world clasped my hand. "You've regained your honor." I stood beneath the courthouse eaves in Ravenwood's light drizzle. Adrian walked past, tie askew, eyes hollow, shoulders hunched. No victor's bearing, only a lost child trapped in a man's body. My son, his professional reputation dissolved like sugar in rain. Atlas shut its doors. Clients turned away. Colleagues averted their eyes. Divorce from Clarissa split the rest in 2. The house, my house on Ashford Lane, quietly returned to its rightful owner. I felt no joy. Only one certainty, dry and bitter. Justice had spoken, but it was not sweet. It left me with a double sentence. Adrian stripped of honor, and me stripped forever of the image of a son. In that courtroom, the only true victor was truth itself. The house on Ashford Lane had returned to me, just as Clarissa Harlow had promised in court, but I no longer wished to live there. Too many memories, not only the night of Adrian's betrayal, but also the days of happiness with Marianne, were now stained with a metallic taste. I sold the house, closed one door, and opened another. Daniel Mercer proposed we go into partnership, turn part of Redwood Market into a small cafe. I would cook simple yet refined meals, using fresh produce from his shelves. The idea fit as neatly as a well-sharpened knife. Not a large restaurant with exhausting shifts, but a warm corner, beating in rhythm with my own heart. We began modestly, a few tables, a concise breakfast-lunch menu. Quality spoke for itself. Then came regulars, and then weekend lines. The Ravenwood local paper wrote a short piece, calling Hearthstone Café the hidden gem of the town's dining scene. On the best days, every table filled. People waited outside just to taste the blueberry pancakes or the French onion soup I had refined over 40 years. Table 15 is ready, Mr. Victor. The voice of Amira Collins, the young waitress who had joined 3 months earlier, pulled me back to the present. They ordered your special quiche and pear salad. I nodded and returned to the kitchen. At 62, I felt healthier and happier than at 54. Each morning I woke with a hunger to experiment, to share, to tell stories through food. The cafe glowed with warm lights, the sound of spoons against porcelain, the gentle laughter of guests apiece with its own heartbeat. Yet in the corner of the window, the past still loomed like a shadow, reminding me that happiness is always fragile. While preparing the quiche, I thought of strange twists of fate. If Adrian hadn't betrayed me, I might still be confined to that old house, cooking for myself and chewing on regret. Ironically, it was that knife in the back that had opened this door. The front bell jingled. I stayed at the stove until I heard Amira's voice, tense with surprise. "Hello, a table for one? You'd like to see the owner?" "Yes, I'm looking for Victor Harlow." I froze. That voice among 1,000, I knew it. Adrian. After 6 months, this was the first time he had stepped into the new world I'd built. I wiped my hands and walked out. He was visibly thinner. The suit once tailored now hung loose, his hair grayer, dark circles deepening under his eyes. The mask of confidence was gone. The whole cafe fell into a hush in a small town. Scandal never stays hidden for long. "Adrian," I said evenly, "what brings you here?" He faltered under the murmurs around us. "Could we speak in private?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to send him away, to return the rejection he once gave me. Another part, the father who still remembered the boy, couldn't be so cruel. 5 minutes, I said. In the office. Daniel's worried eyes followed, but I signaled it was fine. The door closed. "Speak," I told him. He collapsed into the chair. Up close, his exhaustion was plain. I came to apologize," he said, eyes lowered, silence stretched. "That's all?" I asked. "After everything?" He looked up. There was a trace of regret in his eyes, thin as a film of water, but behind it, the same old flicker of calculation. "I made mistakes. Terrible ones. I shouldn't have tricked you into signing, shouldn't have driven you out. I was under pressure." "Pressure," I cut in. "That's a polite word for a scheme of fraud." He froze, then poured it out. "I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my home. Clarissa took half the assets. Clients abandoned me. The firm's about to collapse. I'm struggling." His voice wavered, enough to stir a flicker of pity. Then his eyes darted toward the new espresso machine, the full pastry case, the stability I had built, and I understood his true reason. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. "Money?" He flinched, but didn't deny it. "I need help to rebuild. Just temporary. Your cafe is doing well. Maybe I could invest, become a partner. I'll change. I'll prove myself." So that was it. Not remorse that brought him, but calculation. As always, he thought only of himself. I looked at the man before me, the one I had carried through fevers, taught to tie shoelaces, smiled at his first words. When had he become this? Or had he always been, and I simply refused to see? "No," I said firmly. "No money, no partnership, no investment, nothing." His face twisted. The mask of repentance tore away in an instant. "You're taking revenge. You enjoy seeing me ruined, don't you?" "No, Adrian." I shook my head. "I take no pleasure in this. I just no longer trust you, and I will not involve myself. Not personally, not in business." "But I'm your son," he burst out, as if it were his last charm. "Yes, you are my son," I nodded. "And that is the only reason you are still sitting here instead of being shown the door. But being my son does not entitle you to my money, my work, or my life. You chose deceit, now carry its weight." He ground his teeth. "You think you've escaped? You've only won a small round. I'll take everything back my way." I met his gaze, voice cold as a verdict. "You have nothing left to take from me but contempt, and that is the only thing I'll give you for free." He shot to his feet, slammed the door. The bang cracked like a gunshot. The glass frame shuddered. The grand opening photo crashed down, shards scattering. I picked it up, the broken glass reflecting my face. A father who had lost his son, and a man who had been given a new family by choice. Back at the counter, Daniel was waiting, his eyes asking, "Are you all right?" "Perhaps," I said. "The demons he carries, if he still has a conscience, will be punishment enough." I recounted what had happened. Daniel frowned. "Aren't you afraid he might try something?" He looked unstable. I shrugged. "The house is sold. The legal disputes are closed. The cafe is fully registered. All he has left are empty words." Daniel didn't argue. He placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezed gently. "Whatever happens, you're not alone. Remember that." Those words struck deeper than he knew. Not alone. After years of exhaustion and betrayal by blood, I had a new family not by birth, but by choice. Daniel and Helen Mercer, Edward Lane at Celestine Hall, Sylvia Grant at Willow and Thyme, Amira and the Café team, the regulars who came not just to eat but to talk, to warm each other under golden lights. The day went on. I cooked, laughed at Amira's jokes. By the time we lowered the shutters, the memory of Adrian's visit had already faded almost. That night, Daniel stayed behind to help clean. We sat by the window, sipping red wine, a ritual after a good day. "You know," Daniel mused, "sometimes things happen for a reason. Without that blow, we would never have opened this cafe. You wouldn't have found this new mission, and I wouldn't have expanded my store." He was right. Hearthstone Café hadn't only saved me, it had brought customers to Redwood Market, making the name freshest in Ravenwood ring true. "Every betrayal carries a lesson," I nodded. "Even that one." "So what did you learn?" I looked at the cafe lights reflected in the glass, recalling the voices and laughter of the day. That family is not only blood, that life always offers a second chance, if we dare to open the door. And nothing heals more than creating something with your own hands and sharing it. Daniel raised his glass. "To second chances." "To second chances," I replied. The wine warmed my chest. Outside, Ravenwood sank into the night. Inside, the small flame of Hearthstone Café still burned small, steady, bright enough for anyone searching for a way home. Hearthstone Café, after closing hours, was as silent as a battlefield just cleared. A dried streak of coffee across the counter, 2 half-finished cups, a chaircloth draped crookedly, all remnants of a long day and a short confrontation. The wall clock tick-tock, tick-tock, in rhythm with the chilly wind whistling through the doorframe. The pool of golden light from the last lamp barely illuminated a small patch, the rest drowned in shadow, as though Adrian might step out from any corner. I sat alone, my thoughts refusing to release me from him. Though I had refused him, though I had heard all his threats, the aftertaste remained bitter. Not regret for the decision, I knew it was right, but sorrow that we had come to this. My only son had become a stranger, someone I had to guard against. Where had I gone wrong? Was it the long shifts that stretched across his childhood? Was it forcing my passion for the kitchen onto a boy who was never like me? Such questions held no answers. Regret doesn't change the past. It only poisons the present. And I was too tired to keep living in a poisoned life. As I stood to turn off the light, my eyes caught an envelope neatly placed on the counter. I was certain it hadn't been there before. Someone had slipped it in quietly while I had been talking with Daniel. The golden lamp glowed upon it, as if exposing a long-buried secret. My name, Victor Harlow, written in Adrian's familiar straight-lined hand. I opened it. Inside was a yellowed page, torn from Teddy's cooking adventures, with a picture of the little bear flipping pancakes. I recognized it instantly. The very book I had once read to him when he was 5 or 6. He loved it so much he begged for pancakes, like Teddy's every morning. On the back, shaky ink letters. Dad, I kept this as a piece of my life I haven't ruined. I don't know why, maybe deep down I've always known I was wrong. I'm sorry, if the word sorry still means anything to you. Your son. My chest clenched hot and aching like 2 hands squeezing an unhealed heart. For a moment, I wanted to crush the page in my fist. But another hand trembled and folded it carefully, as gently as smoothing a napkin on a dinner table. Not forgiveness, not yet. The wound was still too fresh. But perhaps this was a small crack in the frozen wall that father and son had built over so many years. I slipped the page into my pocket, switched off the lights, and locked the door. Ravenwood outside was not fully asleep. A few windows still glowing gold, the clink of dishes, the murmur of voices. I walked through the dark gaps between those lights, the unbridgeable distance between father and son. Dry leaves rustled along the pavement, autumn wind carrying the scent of pumpkin and damp wood. Somewhere in town, Adrian too was likely sitting alone, lost, reaping what he had sown. But I would no longer let his story define my life. He was only a chapter sad, yes, but not the whole book. Above Redwood Market, my new life was waiting. Imperfect, still filled with challenges, but mine, rebuilt by my own hands. There, I was no longer somebody's father or a retired chef, but a whole person, with my own worth and dignity. I pulled up my collar and walked faster. In the small kitchen, a recipe was waiting. Seasonal pumpkin, a pinch of nutmeg, a spoonful of honey, a warm dish for tomorrow morning. Old ingredients, a new method, just like my life. Tomorrow, I would cook again, laugh with customers as though nothing weighed on me. But tonight, in my pocket, an old page still burned bright, the late confession of the son who had once been my entire world. Perhaps life always leaves its cracks, but it is through those very cracks that light finds its way in. What do you think about Adrian's final letter? Was it a genuine confession, or just another move in his calculation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to press like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next episodes. And if you know someone struggling with family wounds, share this video with them. Perhaps it will remind them that there is always a second chance for all of us.